The conference hall stretched 300 meters in every direction, a massive dome of crystalline material that showed the stars beyond. Representatives from 247 species sat in their designated sections, their bodies as varied as the worlds they came from. Some breathed methane, others required extreme cold, and a few existed partially in dimensions humans couldn't fully perceive. But they all understood one thing. Power, Ambassador Hyan Kim stood at the human podium, a simple raised platform that seemed insignificant compared to the towering structures occupied by the elder races. He was a tall man with graying hair and calm eyes that had seen Earth unite after centuries of conflict. Behind him, displayed on holographic screens, were the resource reports the Thalorian Empire had demanded. "We cannot comply with these demands," Hyan said, his voice steady and clear. The translation devices embedded in the chamber converted his words into 246 other languages simultaneously. Earth's outer colonies are home to 15 million human citizens. They are not bargaining chips. From the highest platform in the chamber, Supreme Matriarch Velsara of the Thalorian Empire looked down at the human. Her species had ruled vast portions of the galaxy for 3,000 years. They were large reptilian beings with scales that shimmered like oil on water, and their size alone intimidated most species. She made a sound that the translators rendered as laughter. "You have been part of this council for 15 years, human," she said, her voice booming through the chamber. 15 years. My species has held power here for 3 millennia. You do not understand how things work. Tribute is not optional for lesser species. Captain Jiwon Park watched the proceedings from Earth's diplomatic vessel in orbit above the council world. She commanded the UEN Indomitable, humanity's largest warship, though it was tiny compared to the massive Thalorian battle stations that hung in space like dark moons. She had fought in Earth's unification wars, back when humans still killed each other over borders and resources. Those days were supposed to be over. "They're not going to back down," her first officer said quietly. "The Thalorians never back down." Jiwon nodded but said nothing. She watched the diplomatic channel, hoping Hyan could find words that would prevent what she feared was coming. Back in the council chamber, Hyan remained calm. "We came to this council seeking peaceful cooperation between species. We have shared our technology, our culture, our friendship. We have asked only to be treated as equals." "Equals?" Velsara's laugh echoed again. "You are children playing with starships. Your species hasn't even existed as long as some of my subordinates have been alive. You will pay the tribute, or you will face consequences." Dr. Yuna Lee sat in the human delegation area, her hands clenched tight. She had studied 300 alien species, learned their languages and customs, and advocated for understanding between humans and the galactic community. But she had also studied Earth's history. She knew what happened when peaceful people were pushed too far. The vote came quickly. The Galactic Council, dominated by species who feared Thalorian power, voted to support the demand. 239 species voted yes. Only 7 voted no, and one of those was humanity itself. The others were small species who barely had voices in the council anyway. Hyan Kim's face remained neutral as the results appeared. "Then Earth withdraws from the Galactic Council," he said simply. "Effective immediately. All diplomatic channels will be closed. All trade agreements are terminated. All human vessels will return to Earth space." The chamber erupted in noise as different species reacted in their various ways. Some showed concern, others indifference. The Thalorians showed satisfaction. 3 days later, Titan colony went dark. Admiral Minho Choi was in his office on Luna Station when the emergency signal came through. Titan had been humanity's largest mining operation, built into the frozen surface of Saturn's biggest moon. 15,000 people lived there. They extracted resources that Earth needed for ship construction and energy production. But more importantly, they were families. Children went to school there. People had been born there. The signal was brief. Multiple contacts entering system. Thalorian signatures. They're not responding to... Then nothing. It took 6 hours for the fastest human ships to reach Titan, What they found was complete destruction. The colony had been hit by plasma weapons so powerful they had melted through kilometers of ice. The habitation domes were gone. Every ship in the dock was destroyed. Every communication relay was slag. And 15,000 people were dead. Captain Jawan Park arrived 12 hours after the attack. She walked through the ruins in her environmental suit, her crew documenting everything. The Thalorians had recorded the attack and broadcast it across the galaxy, just as they had promised. It was meant to be a lesson to any species that defied them. In one section, she found the remains of a school. The small desks were melted into strange shapes. She stood there for a long moment, then activated her communication link. "Admiral," she said quietly, "they killed children." Back on Earth, the planetary government held an emergency session. President Xian Zhang sat at the head of the table, her face carved from stone. Around her were the leaders of every major nation and military branch. For the first time since Earth's unification 30 years ago, they spoke with one voice. "They think we're weak," General Yinji Song said. She commanded Earth's Strategic Defense Initiative, a branch of the military that most civilians didn't even know existed. "They think because we pursue peace we can't fight." "Can we fight them?" someone asked. "They have 200 star systems. Thousands of ships. Their technology is more advanced than ours in most areas." Admiral Minho Choi leaned forward. His hair was white now, but his eyes were sharp. "Their technology is more advanced in most areas," he agreed. "But not all areas. And they don't know what we've been keeping secret." He activated a holographic display. It showed weapon systems, ship designs, and technologies that made everyone in the room go quiet. "We've been preparing for this day since we first encountered hostile alien species," Minho continued. "We hoped we'd never need these. But we're not the naive species they think we are. We learned our lessons in Blood on Earth. We know what happens to those who can't defend themselves." Hyein Kim, who had returned from the council world, spoke up. "If we do this, there's no going back. We'll be declaring war on one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. They have allies. Resources we can't match. They killed 15,000 civilians," Jawan Park said through the communication link. She was still at Titan, still walking through the ruins. "They killed children to make a point." "What kind of species does that?" President Xian Zhang looked at each person in the room. Then she made her decision. "Recall every human ship to Earth space. Full mobilization of all military forces. And send a message to the Thalorian Empire." "What should it say?" someone asked. Xian's voice was ice. "Tell them they have made a grave miscalculation." Across human space, the message went out. Millions of humans who had never expected to fight readied themselves. Ship construction facilities that had been building peaceful vessels switched to war production. And in secret laboratories hidden throughout the solar system, scientists activated weapons they had hoped would never be needed. The Thalorian Empire received Earth's message and laughed. They had fought and defeated hundreds of species. One more would be easy. They didn't understand yet. They didn't understand what humans were capable of when their children were threatened. They didn't understand that a species that had nearly destroyed itself in global wars had learned hard. Lessons about violence and survival they would learn soon enough, General Yunji. Song walked through the underground facility that didn't appear on any official maps. It was buried 3 kilometers beneath the Mojave Desert, shielded by layers of rock and electromagnetic dampening fields that made it invisible to orbital sensors. She had overseen its construction 20 years ago, back when Earth was still learning that the universe was full of species that saw kindness as weakness. Dr. Soman Kang waited for her in the main laboratory. The scientist was young, barely 40, but she had 3 doctorates in quantum mechanics, exotic matter physics, and something she called dimensional warfare theory. Behind her, suspended in a containment field, was a device the size of a basketball that glowed with a soft blue light. "Show me," Yunji said. Soman activated a holographic display. It showed a simulation of a large asteroid, roughly the size of a small moon. She pressed a button, and the blue device in the containment field pulsed once. In the simulation, the asteroid simply stopped existing. There was no explosion, no debris field. One moment it was there, and the next moment there was nothing but empty space. Quantum destabilization, Soman explained. We're not destroying the target in the traditional sense. We're convincing the universe that the target never existed in the first place. The matter doesn't explode or scatter. It just ceases to be. How many of these do we have? Unji asked. 73 operational units. We can build more, but the exotic matter requirements are expensive. Each one can eliminate a target up to 5 kilometers in diameter. Yunji nodded slowly. The Thalorian battle stations were each about 3 kilometers across. What else? Soman led her to another section of the facility. Here, technicians worked on sleek missiles that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Relativistic kinetic weapons. We accelerate these to 99% light speed. At that velocity, even a small projectile hits with the force of a nuclear weapon. But there's no radiation, no electromagnetic pulse, just pure kinetic energy. The Galactic Council banned these, Yunji said. They banned them because they're terrifying, Soman agreed. We signed the treaty, but we never said we didn't build them first. She smiled slightly. We just promised not to use them. Past tense might become relevant soon. In orbit around Mars, Commander Taeyanan inspected his fleet. To anyone watching, there was nothing there. The space around Mars looked empty except for the normal civilian traffic and defense satellites. But Taeyan knew different. His ships were there, all 47 of them, each one wrapped in the most advanced stealth technology humanity had ever developed. His second in command, Commander Hanaru, floated next to him in zero gravity. They were inside the flagship, the UEN Shadow. But looking at it from outside, no one would know a ship was there at all. The Thalorians use electromagnetic sensors, gravitic detectors, and quantum resonance scanners, Hana said, reviewing her datapad. Our stealth systems fool all three. As far as their sensors are concerned, we're not here. What about visual detection? Taeyeon asked. The hull absorbs light across all wavelengths. Even if they looked directly at us, they'd see nothing. We're functionally invisible. Taeyeon nodded. His fleet was small compared to the massive Thalorian armadas, but they didn't need to be big. They just needed to be undetectable. In warfare, surprise was often more valuable than numbers deep in Earth's oceans. In a facility built into an undersea trench, Intelligence Officer Do-Yun Bae reviewed 15 years of collected data. From the moment Earth had joined the Galactic Council, he had been working on infiltrating Thalorian communication networks. It had taken years. The Thalorians were arrogant, but they weren't stupid. Their security was sophisticated, but humans had spent centuries developing cyber warfare techniques against each other. They knew how to be patient, how to hide in systems, how to steal information without being detected. Do-Yun had maps of every major Thalorian military installation. He knew their ship movements, their supply lines, their communication protocols. He knew which bases were heavily defended and which ones relied on their reputation to keep them safe. We have 17 primary targets, he explained to Admiral Minho Choi through a secure channel. Military installations in 5 different star systems. If we hit them simultaneously, we can cripple their offensive capability in this region of space. Casualties? Minho asked. All 17 targets are purely military. No civilian populations within blast radius. The Thalorians keep their military separate from their cities. They don't want their citizens to see the reality of their wars. Good, we're not like them. We don't kill civilians. Back on Luna Station, the military command center buzzed with activity. Admiral Minho Choi stood at the center, surrounded by holographic displays showing human military assets across the solar system. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier was being mobilized. Colonel Jiho Nam commanded the ground forces, though in space warfare, ground forces seemed outdated. But Jiho knew better. If we're taking Thalorian installations, we'll need boots on the ground, he explained. Space stations can be destroyed from orbit, but if we want to capture intelligence or make a point, "We need soldiers who can breach and clear." His forces trained in brutal conditions. They practiced in zero gravity and toxic atmospheres in extreme heat and cold. Human soldiers had one advantage over most alien species. Earth's high gravity meant they were stronger than most aliens in standard conditions. And Earth's violent history meant they knew tactics that peaceful species had never needed to develop. Fleet Admiral Sujin Oh coordinated the overall assault plan. She was younger than Minho, only 53, but she had proven herself in countless simulations and the few skirmishes Earth had faced against pirates and raiders. Now she faced her real test. "Operation Reckoning," she said, naming the assault. "We hit them everywhere at once. They won't know where to defend because they won't see us coming until it's too late." The planning took 2 weeks. Every detail was checked and rechecked. Human lives would depend on getting this right. But more than that, Earth's future depended on it. If they failed, the Thalorians would destroy humanity completely. During those 2 weeks, the Thalorian Empire watched Earth's mobilization with amusement. Their intelligence services reported the human fleet gathering, the increased military activity, the war preparations. They shared the information with other species on the Galactic Council. "The humans are planning something," one ambassador noted. "Let them plan," Valsara replied. "They have a few hundred ships. We have thousands. They have limited resources. We control entire sectors. This will be over quickly." What the Thalorians didn't see were the ghost ships hiding in plain sight. They didn't detect the quantum weapons being loaded onto vessels they couldn't scan. They didn't know their communication networks had been compromised years ago. They saw what they expected to see, a primitive species making futile preparations for a war they couldn't win. On the day before the assault, General Yunji Song addressed the assembled military forces through a galaxy-wide communication network. Millions of humans watched from ships, stations, and facilities across the solar system. "They came to Titan," she said, her voice hard as steel. "They killed 15,000 of our people. They killed our children. They did it to teach us a lesson, to show us what happens when we don't obey them." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Tomorrow we teach them a different lesson. We show them what happens when you harm humanity. We show them that mercy is not weakness, that patience is not cowardice, that choosing peace does not mean we cannot wage war." She looked directly into the camera and threw it at every human listening. "We didn't want this war. We tried diplomacy. We tried compromise. We tried everything to avoid violence. But they left us no choice. So, tomorrow we remind the galaxy of something they seem to have forgotten. Humans are survivors. We climbed to the top of our world's food chain by being better predators than anything else on our planet. We nearly destroyed ourselves learning how to kill efficiently. We know war in ways these aliens can't imagine." Her voice dropped lower, more dangerous. "They wanted ruthlessness. They'll get it. But we're not monsters. We'll target only military assets. Only those who chose to serve an empire that murders children. And when it's over, the galaxy will understand. You don't threaten humanity's children. Ever." The communication ended. Across human space, millions of people prepared for what came next. Some were scared, some were angry, some were both. But they were united in one thing. The Thalorians had made a terrible mistake. Captain Juwan Park stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, looking at the stars beyond the viewport. In a few hours, those stars would be filled with weapons fire and dying ships. She thought about the children on Titan, about the families destroyed, about the casual cruelty of an empire that thought itself untouchable. "All ships report ready," her tactical officer said. G1 nodded. "Then let's show them what happens when you wake up humanity." The Thalorian military base at Kepler 442 hung in space like a massive gray fortress. It was home to 12,000 soldiers and housed 140 warships. The base commander, a veteran of 50 campaigns, sat in his office reviewing routine reports. Another boring day in a posting that saw little action. The humans were 300 light-years away, and even if they tried something stupid, His early warning systems would detect them days before they arrived. The alarm never sounded. Commander. Taeyeon-on's ghost fleet materialized from nothing, appearing within weapons range before the Thalorians even knew something was wrong. The stealth systems disengaged, and suddenly 47 human warships were there, their weapons already locked on target. Fire, Taeyeon said calmly. The quantum destabilization weapons didn't make dramatic explosions. They simply erased sections of the station from existence. One moment there were gun emplacements and shield generators, the next moment there was nothing. The Thalorian shields, designed to stop conventional weapons, did nothing against technology that convinced reality to delete the target. At the exact same moment, across 5 different star systems, 16 other Thalorian military bases came under simultaneous attack. The coordination was perfect, timed down to the microsecond. The Thalorians had no chance to warn each other, no time to mount a coordinated defense. At the Arcturus station, Captain Jawan Park led the assault personally. The Indomitable and her battle group dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly on top of the Thalorian position. The enemy ships scrambled to respond, but human targeting systems were already locked on. Remember, Jawan said to her crew, military targets only. No civilian ships, no colony worlds. We're not like them. The relativistic kinetic missiles struck at 99% light speed. The Thalorian ships barely had time to register the incoming projectiles before they hit. Each impact released energy equivalent to multiple nuclear weapons, but with surgical precision. Human weapons officers targeted engines, weapons systems, and life support. They weren't trying to vaporize the enemy. They were systematically destroying their ability to fight. Commander. Hana-Ru led her fighter wing through the chaos of the battle. Human fighters were smaller and more agile than Thalorian interceptors, and human pilots had an advantage the aliens didn't understand. Humans had evolved to move in 3 dimensions through atmosphere, chasing prey through forests and across plains. Their brains were wired for complex spatial movement in ways that many alien species, evolved in 2-dimensional oceans or simple terrestrial environments, couldn't match. Hannah twisted her fighter through a debris field, her hands moving on the controls with practiced ease. A Thalorian interceptor tried to follow and couldn't match her movements. She locked on and fired, disabling its engines. The alien pilot ejected, and Hana marked the position for rescue. Even in the middle of combat, humans were collecting enemy survivors. All ships, watch your fire lanes, she called out to her squadron. Don't hit the escape pods. We're better than that. Colonel Jiho-nam's ground forces breached the station at Kepler 442 after Taeyeon's fleet had disabled its defenses. The Thalorians fought hard, but they were defending a station that was falling apart around them. Human soldiers moved through the corridors with brutal efficiency, using tactics learned from centuries of urban warfare on Earth, but Jiho's orders were clear. Disable. Don't kill unless necessary. Capture, don't execute. Show the galaxy that humans could be ruthless without being monsters. The Thalorian soldiers fought bravely, but they were confused. The humans should have been massacring everyone, destroying everything. That's what the Thalorians would have done. Instead, the humans targeted key systems, captured strategic positions, and actually provided medical aid to wounded enemies. What kind of warriors are these? One captured Thalorian officer asked. Bleeding from a wound that a human medic was treating. The kind that don't kill children. Jiho replied coldly. Fleet Admiral Sujin-Oh watched the battle unfold from her command ship in Earth orbit. Holographic displays showed all 17 engagements simultaneously. The data streaming in was overwhelming, but the picture was clear. Operation Reckoning was succeeding beyond even the most optimistic projections. Casualties? She asked her staff. 41 dead, 214 wounded, came the reply. Enemy casualties are approximately 2.3 million military personnel. Civilian casualties, 0. Sujin nodded grimly. Those 41 humans had families, loved ones who would grieve. But compared to the 15,000 on Titan? Compared to what the Thalorians would have inflicted on Earth given the chance? The numbers were almost miraculous. The battle for the Thalorian home fleet was the largest engagement. The Thalorians had assembled their most powerful warships to defend their core systems, confident that no enemy could break through. They had 800 ships, massive vessels that had conquered dozens of species. Captain Jiwon Park's fleet numbered only 60 ships. The odds seemed impossible, but odds assumed both sides were using comparable technology and tactics. The Thalorians were using weapons and strategies that had worked for 3,000 years. Humans were using weapons the galaxy had never seen, and tactics born from Earth's bloody history. The quantum destabilization weapons turned the tide immediately. Thalorian dreadnoughts, ships that had survived countless battles, simply ceased to exist. Their shields, their armor, their size meant nothing. The human weapons didn't care about any of that. "Target their command structure," Jiwon ordered. "Take out the flagships first." Human missiles, moving at relativistic speeds, struck the Thalorian command ships before they could coordinate a proper defense. The enemy fleet fell into chaos as ship after ship lost communication with Central Command. Individual captains tried to organize local defenses, but they were fighting a battle unlike anything they'd trained for, and then there was the psychological element. The Thalorians watched as their strongest weapons did nothing against human ships. They saw their most advanced targeting systems fail to lock onto human fighters. They experienced the horror of watching their friends and comrades simply vanish as quantum weapons erased them from existence. Panic spread through the Thalorian ranks. Some ships tried to retreat. Others fought with desperate courage. A few surrendered, broadcasting emergency codes that humans had learned from intelligence officer Do Yunbei's infiltration of their networks. "Accept all surrenders," Jiwon commanded, "and broadcast our actions on all channels. Let the galaxy see." She was following Admiral Minho Choi's directive, "Make this public. Show everyone what humanity could do, but also show them how humanity chose to do it." The Thalorians had broadcast the destruction of Titan to demonstrate their cruelty. Humans would broadcast this battle to demonstrate their capability and their restraint. The engagement lasted 18 hours. When it ended, the Thalorian military presence in this region of space was effectively destroyed. 17 bases were captured or disabled. 800 ships of the home fleet were destroyed or surrendered. Thalorian military casualties exceeded 2 million human casualties, 247 dead, over 1,000 wounded. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the broadcast spread through hundreds of star systems. Species that had considered humans primitive and weak saw weapons technology that exceeded anything the elder races possessed. They saw tactical coordination that made the Thalorian military look like amateurs. They saw human soldiers providing medical care to wounded enemies even as the battle raged, but most importantly, they saw the precision. Despite overwhelming force, despite weapons that could have cracked planets, humans had targeted only military assets. Not one civilian had died in the assault. Not one colony world had been threatened. The message was clear: humans could destroy the Thalorians completely if they chose to. They were choosing not to on the Thalorian homeworld. Supreme Matriarch Velsara watched the destruction of her fleets with growing horror. Her species had ruled through fear and overwhelming force for millennia. They had never encountered a species that could match them militarily, and certainly never one that could exceed them. She looked at the casualty reports, the lists of destroyed bases, the images of human ships casually dismantling her most powerful vessels. And then she looked at the other reports, the ones that showed human medics treating Thalorian wounded, human ships rescuing Thalorian survivors from damaged vessels. "What have we done?" she whispered. Her military advisors stood silent, having no answer. They had awakened something they didn't understand. A species that could wage war with precision they couldn't imagine, but chose to show mercy they had never offered back on Earth. Admiral Minho Choi addressed the planet through every communication channel. Behind him, screens showed the battles, the victories, the carefully documented proof that humanity had targeted only military assets. "The Thalorian Empire killed 15,000 of our people," he said. "They killed our children. They did it to demonstrate their power, to teach us that we were weak." He paused, his expression hard. We have demonstrated our power. We have taught them a different lesson. But we are not butchers. We will not slaughter civilians. We will not become the monsters they are." His voice softened slightly. "This war can end now. The Thalorians have lost. But we offer them something they never offered us, the chance to surrender with dignity, the chance to rebuild, the chance to learn that there are better ways to exist in this galaxy." The broadcast ended. Across human space, people celebrated and mourned simultaneously. They had won, but the cost was measured in human lives that could never be replaced. 41 families would receive notifications that their loved ones weren't coming home. Captain Jiwon Park stood on her bridge looking at the stars. Around her ship floated the debris of the greatest space battle in human history. They had won. The Thalorians were broken, but she felt no joy. Only tired satisfaction that it was over, and profound sadness for what it had cost. "Set course for Earth," she said quietly. "It's time to go home." The Galactic Council chamber was silent when Ambassador Hyun Kim entered. Every species representative watched as the human walked calmly to the podium he had left 6 weeks earlier. The last time he stood here, the Council had voted to support Thalorian demands for tribute. Today, the Thalorian Empire's military power lay in ruins across 5-star systems. Hyun placed his hands on the podium and looked around the chamber. He saw fear in many faces, species uncertain what humanity would do now that they had demonstrated such devastating capability. He saw calculation in others, ambassadors already planning how to align themselves with Earth's sudden rise in power. And he saw shame in a few, species that had voted against their conscience because they feared the Thalorians. "I returned to this chamber 6 weeks ago," Hyun began, his voice calm and measured, "to tell you that Earth would not pay tribute to bullies. That humanity valued sovereignty and dignity above submission. The Thalorian Empire responded by destroying our colony on Titan. 15,000 civilians died. 5,000 of them were children." He paused, letting the weight of those numbers settle. "We could have responded the same way. We have weapons that could have cracked the Thalorian homeworld. We could have deployed biological weapons that would have rendered their colonies uninhabitable. We could have done to them what they did to us, multiplied 1,000-fold. Another pause. The chamber remained absolutely silent, but we didn't. Because humanity doesn't wage war on civilians. We targeted 17 military installations across 5-star systems. We engaged and defeated their home fleet in open combat. And when Thalorian soldiers surrendered, we took them prisoner. When their wounded needed medical attention, we provided it. When their escape pods drifted in space, we rescued them." He pulled up a holographic display showing detailed casualty reports, verified by independent observers from neutral species. Thalorian military casualties, 2.3 million. Civilian casualties, 0. Because we chose to show the restraint they refused to show us? President Seon Jang watched the broadcast from Earth, surrounded by her cabinet. The planetary government had been in continuous session since the war began, managing resources, coordinating relief efforts for wounded soldiers, and preparing for whatever came next. "He's doing well," her chief of staff said quietly. Seon nodded but remained focused on the screen. This moment would define humanity's place in the galaxy for generations. Hyun needed to make them understand. Earth sought justice, not conquest. Deterrence, not domination. In the council chamber, Hyun continued. "But let me be absolutely clear about something. We demonstrated restraint in how we waged this war. That does not mean we demonstrated the full extent of our capabilities." He activated another display, this one showing schematics of weapon systems that made several ambassadors physically recoil. Planet-cracking bombs, star-killing devices, biological weapons that could sterilize entire worlds, technology that could destabilize the fabric of space itself. We developed these weapons over decades, hoping we'd never need them. We kept them secret because we believe such power should be used only as an absolute last resort. But make no mistake, if anyone threatens humanity's survival, if anyone targets our civilians again, we will not show restraint a second time. The threat hung in the air like a blade. Several species representatives looked genuinely terrified. Dr. Yuna Lee sat in the human delegation section, watching the chamber's reaction. She had spent years advocating for peaceful coexistence with alien species. She still believed in that goal. But she also understood that peace required strength. The galaxy needed to know that humanity could defend itself and would defend others who couldn't defend themselves. From her highest platform, Supreme Matriarch Velsara rose slowly. The chamber turned to watch. The Thalorian leader looked diminished somehow, smaller than she had seen before. The arrogance that had defined her species for millennia was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like humility. "Ambassador Kim," she said, her voice no longer booming with confidence, "I speak on behalf of the Thalorian Empire. We acknowledge our defeat. We acknowledge our crime in destroying your colony. We acknowledge that humanity showed mercy we did not deserve." She paused. And several representatives who knew Thalorian culture recognized what came next, a formal apology, something their species almost never gave. "We apologize for the deaths we caused. We offer full reparations to the families of those killed on Titan. We surrender all territorial claims in the disputed sectors. And we ask humanity to consider peace between our peoples." The chamber erupted in noise. The Thalorians never apologized, never surrendered, never asked for anything. But here was their supreme matriarch, doing all three before the entire Galactic Council. Han let the noise continue for a moment, then raised his hand. Silence fell again. "Earth accepts your apology," he said. "We will negotiate the terms of reparations. We will establish new borders that both our peoples can live with. And yes, we will consider peace." He looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many ambassadors as possible. "But understand this, the old order is over. The time when powerful species could bully weaker ones with impunity has ended. Humanity will not stand by and watch genocide, slavery, or oppression. We will defend not just ourselves, but any species that asks for our help." A small ambassador from a species called the Ventari stood. They were one of the species that had voted against the Thalorian demands weeks ago, knowing it would make them targets. Their homeworld had been threatened with destruction if they continued to oppose Thalorian interests. "Does humanity truly mean this?" the Ventari ambassador asked, his voice trembling with something between hope and disbelief. "You would defend species you barely know?" Hyan nodded. "We would. Because we remember what it was like to be weak. We remember what it was like to be threatened by those stronger than us. Earth's history is full of powerful nations oppressing weaker ones. We learned, eventually, that such behavior leads only to endless war. We're offering the galaxy a different path." Former Counselor Yunwu Shin, a representative from a species that had human ancestry from ancient colonization efforts, stood to speak. His people had been part of the Council for centuries but had little real power. "Many species have secretly hoped for someone to challenge Thalorian dominance," Yunwu said. "But we feared the cost would be too high. We feared that any species powerful enough to defeat the Thalorians would simply replace them as oppressors." He looked at Hyan with something like admiration. "Humanity has proven different. You won a war using weapons we didn't know existed. You showed capability beyond our understanding. But you also showed mercy, restraint, and a commitment to justice rather than revenge. You've given us hope that the galaxy can be better than it has been." Over the following days, the Galactic Council underwent the most significant restructuring in its 3,000-year history. The old power structure, dominated by a few elder species who had held control through military might and political manipulation, was dismantled. A new system emerged, one that gave real voice to smaller species and established actual accountability for aggressive actions. Earth was offered a permanent seat on the newly formed Security Directorate, the body responsible for maintaining peace and responding to threats. They accepted, with the condition that the Directorate would include representatives from multiple species across all power levels. Captain Jiwon Park returned to Earth as a hero, though she didn't feel like one. She had lost 41 crew members in the war, men and women she had trained with and fought alongside. Their names were added to the memorial at Luna Station. Joining the 15,000 from Titan. She visited the families when she could, offering what comfort she could give. Most understood that their loved ones had died protecting humanity. Some were angry that war had been necessary at all. She couldn't blame them. Admiral Minho Choi oversaw the demobilization of most human forces and the integration of some units into the new Galactic Defense Force. Human technology and tactics were shared with allied species, carefully and selectively to help them defend themselves. The quantum destabilization weapons remained classified, however. Some powers were too dangerous to spread. Commander Taeyun On and his Ghost Fleet became the stuff of legend among both human and alien military forces. Stories spread of ships that could appear from nowhere, strike with devastating precision, and vanish again. The psychological impact was almost as important as the military capability. Potential aggressors now had to consider that humanity might be watching, unseen and undetected. Dr. Yuna Lee established cultural exchange programs between Earth and dozens of alien species. She believed that understanding between peoples was the best defense against future conflicts. Many species were eager to learn about humanity now, to understand how one species could be both compassionate and ruthlessly effective. She gave lectures, explaining human history, the wars, the genocides, the dark chapters that humanity had survived and learned from. She explained that humans understood the cost of violence because they had inflicted it on themselves for thousands of years. They knew what hatred and fear could do because they had experienced it firsthand. "We're not better than you," she told alien audiences. "We're just further along a path that every species must walk. The path from savage to civilized, from divided to united, from fearful to compassionate. It's a hard path. We stumbled many times, but we kept walking." Intelligence Officer Do Yun-Bei quietly continued his work, now with official support from multiple species. His infiltration of Thalorian networks had been so complete that the Council asked him to help establish better security protocols across the galaxy. He agreed, while carefully maintaining Earth's own intelligence advantages. Trust was growing, but verification was still important. 6 months after the war, Ambassador Hyun Kim stood again in the Council chamber. This time, he was presenting Earth's proposal for a new charter, one that would bind all member species to certain fundamental principles: no genocide, no slavery, no aggressive expansion, no targeting of civilians in warfare. "These principles are simple," he said. "So simple that it seems absurd they need to be written down. But history shows that without clear rules and real consequences, the strong will always oppress the weak. We're proposing a galaxy where that's no longer possible." The vote was overwhelming. 239 species voted yes. Only 8 abstained and 0 voted no. The Thalorians, humbled but not broken, voted yes with the rest. After the session, Velsara approached Hyun privately. They stood near a window overlooking the planet below, 2 former enemies trying to find a path forward. "Why did you spare us?" she asked. "Your weapons could have destroyed my entire species. After what we did to Titan, you would have been justified." Hyun was quiet for a moment, thinking about his answer. "Because destroying you wouldn't have brought back the people you killed. It would only have created more death, more grief. And because we needed to show the galaxy that there's a better way. If we had committed genocide in response to mass murder, we would have proven that violence only leads to more violence." He looked at her directly. "We spared you because we want to build a galaxy where mercy is possible, where former enemies can become allies, where species can resolve their differences without ending in extinction." Velsara nodded slowly. "My people have much to learn from yours." "And we have things to learn from you," Hyun replied. "That's how progress works. Through exchange, not domination." The galaxy was changing, and Earth sat at the center of that change. Not as conquerors, but as an example of what was possible when power was tempered with wisdom and strength, was balanced with compassion. 5 years had passed since Operation Reckoning. The galaxy looked very different now. Admiral Minho Choi stood in the command center of Unity Station. a massive facility orbiting a neutral world halfway between Earth and the former Thalorian core systems. He was older now, his white hair thinner, but his eyes remained sharp. As the Galactic Defense Coordinator, he oversaw military forces from 43 different species, all working together under a unified command structure. "Report from the Outer Rim," his aide said, a young Ventari officer named Kellis. "3 more species have requested membership in the Defense Pact." Minho nodded. "Send them the standard information packet and schedule meetings with their representatives. We'll need to assess their capabilities and make sure they understand the responsibilities that come with membership." The Defense Pact had started with just 7 species, the ones who had voted against Thalorian demands all those years ago. Now it included over 100 species, from tiny civilizations with just a few colony worlds to major powers like the Thalorians themselves, who had joined 2 years ago after proving their commitment to reform. The pact was simple. Members agreed to defend each other from aggression, share defensive technology, and submit to arbitration for disputes between member species. Any species that broke these rules faced expulsion and potential military action. So far, the system had prevented 3 potential wars and resolved dozens of territorial disputes peacefully. Ambassador Hyun Kim had stepped down from his role last year, having served for 20 years total. His replacement was younger, but Hyun remained an advisor and helped train the new generation of diplomats. He spent his time writing now, documenting humanity's journey from isolated world to galactic leader. He sat in his apartment on Earth, looking at the manuscript on his screen. It was a history, but also a warning. Power was seductive. Even good intentions could corrupt if not carefully monitored. Earth had to remain vigilant, had to remember why they fought and what they fought for. His door chimed. Dr. Yuna Lee entered, carrying 2 cups of tea. "Still writing?" she asked, sitting across from him. "Always," Hyun replied with a smile. "Someone needs to document this era properly. Too many species write history to make themselves look good." "I'm trying to write it honestly, including our mistakes?" Yuna asked. "Especially our mistakes. Future generations need to know that we weren't perfect, that we struggled with moral questions, that we made wrong choices sometimes. That power scared us even as we wielded it." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. 2 old friends who had helped reshape the galaxy. Captain Jiwon Park walked through the halls of the Galactic Military Academy on Mars. The facility trained officers from 60 different species, teaching them human tactics alongside traditional military theory from across the galaxy. She served as the commandant now, having retired from active combat duty 3 years ago. In one classroom, she watched a mixed species unit working through a tactical simulation. A young Thalorian officer worked alongside a human, a Ventari, and 2 other aliens trying to develop a strategy for defending a civilian convoy from raiders. They argued, debated, and finally came to a consensus that balanced speed, firepower, and risk. "Good," Jiwon said, entering the room. The students snapped to attention. "You're learning to think beyond your own species' perspective. That's essential. The old way of warfare, where each species fought alone with their own tactics, is inefficient. The new way requires cooperation, flexibility, and understanding." After the class, a young Thalorian officer approached her nervously. "Captain Park, may I ask you something?" "Of course," Jiwon replied. "My parents served in the home fleet during the war. They were on the dreadnought Fierce Fire when you engaged. They survived only because your ships rescued escape pods after the battle." The young officer, a female named Kareth, looked at Jiwon with an expression that mixed gratitude and confusion. "Why did you save them? After what we did to Titan? Why show mercy to people who had just tried to kill you?" Jiwon considered the question. She had been asked similar things many times over the years. "Because your parent was a soldier following orders, just like I was. Because punishing someone for their government's crimes would make me no better than the leaders who ordered the attack on Titan, and because I wanted to prove that humans could win a war without losing our humanity in the process." She looked at the young Thalorian. Directly, your parent is alive, because we chose to be better than our worst impulses. That choice is available to everyone, every day. It's what separates civilization from barbarism. Kirith nodded, clearly moved. Thank you, Captain. I'll try to live up to that standard. Commander Hanaru led a mixed-species fighter wing now, training pilots from across the galaxy in advanced combat techniques. Her squadron had become legendary, regularly winning competitions and showing capabilities that amazed military observers, but more importantly, her pilots had formed deep bonds across species lines. They trusted each other, fought for each other, and demonstrated that cooperation between species wasn't just possible but could exceed what any single species achieved alone. She stood on the flight deck, watching her pilots prepare for a training exercise. Humans worked alongside Thalorians, Ventari, and a dozen other species. They joked with each other, helped each other with equipment checks, and moved with the easy confidence of a well-trained unit. This is what victory looks like, she thought to herself. Not destroyed enemies or captured territory, but former enemies working together toward common goals. Colonel Zhao Nam commanded the Rapid Response Force, a specialized unit designed to intervene in humanitarian crises across the galaxy. When natural disasters struck, when species needed evacuation from dying worlds, when refugees needed protection, his forces deployed. He had just returned from a mission rescuing a species whose sun had gone supernova with little warning. His mixed species teams had evacuated 3 million civilians in 72 hours, a feat that had seemed impossible until they did it. The key is coordination, he told reporters covering the rescue. Every species brings different strengths. Humans are good at improvisation and working under pressure. The Thalorians have incredible endurance and can work in extreme conditions. The Ventari have technical skills that let them repair anything. Together we achieved what none of us could have done alone. Intelligence Officer Doyan Bei ran the Galactic Intelligence Network now, a cooperative organization that shared information about threats to member species. It was a delicate balance, sharing enough information to keep everyone safe. While maintaining operational security for sensitive capabilities, he had helped stop 4 terrorist organizations, prevented 2 attempted coups, and exposed 3 separate plots by species that hadn't learned the lessons of the Thalorian War. Those species faced sanctions and international pressure, but not military action. The goal was to solve problems before violence became necessary. Dr. Soman Kang continued her research, now working with scientists from 40 species. The quantum destabilization weapons remained classified, but other human technologies had been shared carefully. Together, the combined scientific community made advances that no single species could have achieved alone. She was currently working on a project to stabilize a dying star in a system home to 2 billion Ventari. Traditional science said it was impossible, but human creativity combined with Thalorian engineering and Ventari, theoretical physics was making the impossible merely difficult. On Earth, young officer Yamin Ko was preparing for his first assignment with the Galactic Defense Force. He had been 8 years old when Titan was destroyed, old enough to remember seeing the broadcasts, young enough to be shaped by what came after. He represented a new generation of humans who had grown up with aliens as allies rather than unknowns. To him, working with Thalorians or Ventari was normal. The galaxy was his home, not just Earth. He stood at the memorial on Luna Station, looking at the names carved into the black stone. 15,000 names from Titan, 247 names from Operation Reckoning. Each name represented a person, a life, a story cut short. "I'll make it mean something," he whispered. "I'll help build the galaxy you died for." The crisis came from beyond the galaxy. The sensors detected them first, massive ships entering the galactic rim. Technology unlike anything any species had encountered. They didn't respond to communication attempts. They simply moved from system to system, consuming resources and leaving dead worlds behind. The first contact was violent. A small species called the Poreth tried to communicate and were destroyed without warning. 3 billion people died before anyone knew the threat existed. the Galactic Council met in emergency session. Fear filled the chamber as species representatives looked at the data. These weren't conquerors or explorers. They were more like a plague, consuming everything in their path. "We need a military response," one ambassador said. "Against what?" Another replied, "They're not responding to anything. They don't seem to want territory or resources in the traditional sense. They just destroy." The chamber descended into chaos as species argued about what to do. Ambassador Seo-Yoon Park, Hyun Kim's successor, rose to speak. The chamber quieted. 20 years ago, when the Thalorians destroyed Titan, humanity faced a choice. We could surrender, we could hide, or we could fight. We chose to fight, but we chose to fight in a way that proved we were better than those who attacked us. She looked around the chamber. Now the galaxy faces that same choice. An enemy has come that doesn't negotiate, doesn't surrender, doesn't even communicate. They simply destroy. We can run, scatter to different corners of the galaxy and hope they don't find us. Or we can stand together and fight. She activated a display showing human fleet positions, defensive technologies, and battle plans that had been prepared for exactly this kind of scenario. Earth offers its full military support. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier. But we can't do this alone. No single species can. We need everyone. Admiral Minho Choi stood at Unity Station, now the command center for the largest military operation in galactic history. Ships from over 100 species assembled, a fleet unlike anything that had existed before. Humans, Thalorians, Ventari, and dozens of other species worked side by side. Captain Jawan Park came out of retirement, taking command of one of the battle groups. Commander Hanaru led the fighter wings. Colonel Jiho Nam prepared ground forces for the possibility of boarding. Actions: Dr. Soman Kang developed new weapons, specifically designed to counter the invaders. Technology. Young Emin Ko found himself assigned to a mixed-species frigate, working alongside aliens he had trained with and others he had never met. They formed bonds quickly, united by the common threat. The first major battle was brutal. The invaders' technology was advanced, their tactics ruthless. But the Allied forces had something the invaders didn't: the ability to adapt, to improvise, to work together in ways the mechanical precision of the enemy couldn't match. Human, tactical flexibility combined with Thalorian endurance, Ventari technical skills, and the unique capabilities of dozens of other species created something greater than the sum of its parts. After weeks of fighting, after losses that numbed the mind, the Allied forces began to turn the tide. They learned the invaders' patterns, developed counters to their weapons, and found ways to exploit their weaknesses. And through it all, humanity remained at the center, not as conquerors or overlords, but as equals working alongside everyone else. Minho stood on Unity Station's observation deck, watching the combined fleet prepare for what intelligence suggested would be the decisive battle. Ships from across the galaxy hung in space, representing the largest unified force ever assembled. He thought about the journey that had brought them here. From Titan's destruction to Operation Reckoning to this moment, humanity had traveled a path that seemed impossible. They had gone from victims to warriors to leaders, all while trying to hold on to the values that defined them. "Admiral," his aide said quietly. "All forces report ready." Minho nodded. "Send the signal. Tell them what we fight for. Not for conquest or glory, but for survival. For every species' right to exist. For a galaxy where differences are celebrated instead of feared." He looked at the stars beyond the window. "Tell them that 5 years ago, we rebuilt this galaxy on principles of cooperation and mutual respect. Today, we defend it with everything we have. And tomorrow, if we win, we continue building something better than what came before." The fleet moved forward as one, not just humans or Thalorians or Ventari, but a united galaxy facing a common threat. They fought not because they loved war, but because they loved peace enough to defend it. And somewhere on Earth, Hyun Kim added a final paragraph to his manuscript. The greatest victory humanity ever achieved wasn't defeating the Thalorians. It was teaching the galaxy that strength and compassion weren't opposites, but partners. That power was only meaningful when used to protect rather than oppress. That the future belonged not to the strongest species, but to all species willing to stand together. He saved the file and looked out at the night sky, knowing that somewhere out there, humans and aliens fought side by side to defend everything they had built together. The galaxy had been speechless when Earth demonstrated its ruthless capability. Now it spoke with one voice, united in purpose. Defending a future they would build together, that was humanity's true legacy. Not the weapons they developed or the battles they won, but the galaxy they helped create where such unity was possible.